Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack a stack of fascinating sources to bring you the most important nuggets of knowledge. Today, we're taking a deep dive into some really profound insights on mastering our thinking patterns and habits for self-development.
Yeah, the material we're exploring today, it comes from a powerful lecture. It really digs into the complexities of, our modern world.
And it offers a deeply personal pathway for navigating it all.
Exactly. It's about understanding not just what's happening around us, but maybe more importantly, what's happening within us.
We've received some incredibly thought-provoking material for this deep dive. We've got excerpts from a video lecture, a pretty comprehensive knowledge guide, too.
Hmm.
So our mission today is really to pull out the core ideas, maybe some surprising facts, and definitely the practical wisdom that can help you become more, let's say, well-informed.
And maybe less overwhelmed,
Yeah.
right, by just the sheer volume of information and, well, the challenges facing all of us.
And definitely less overwhelmed.
What's really fascinating here, I think, is how these sources connect the big picture, the historical evolution of human thought, societal structures, directly to our individual stuff.
Like our own anxiety and self-doubt today.
Precisely. It's a compelling look at the underlying causes of our current, let's call them predicaments. And crucially, it offers a path towards a different way of living.
Okay, so let's get into that. Our modern world feels uniquely complex, maybe overwhelming. Why is that? The sources suggest it's not just tech advancements.
No, they peel back the layers. They talk about this profound revolution against tradition that seems to be at the heart of our predicament.
A revolution against tradition. What does that actually mean in this context?
Well, a lot of people tend to blame tradition for current problems, right?
Yeah.
But the lecture makes a really strong point.
Yeah.
Most traditions that have survived actually have a foundation in facts.
So they weren't just random rules.
Not at all. They were often essentially idealistic, built on convictions and values that proved useful, over generations.
What's really striking here, and maybe a bit counterintuitive, is how the sources link this whole revolution thing to something maybe we've forgotten. Traditional integrity.
Like the golden rule.
Exactly, an integrity that often gets pushed aside when it clashes with our personal interests. Yet it's presented here as the very basis of our civilization.
It's a foundational truth we seem to be overlooking, maybe even discarding for short-term gains.
Yeah.
And this leads to a really critical point about personal freedom, something we pursue, obviously. But the sources say it hasn't been brought under the censorship of integrities,
Meaning.
meaning our actions aren't sufficiently guided or maybe restrained by fundamental moral principles, universal values like honesty, compassion.
So our internal desire structure, our wants, our impulses, they're not being curbed, integrated, or educated.
Right, they're running a bit wild, you could say, unchecked by deeper wisdom.
And you can really see the consequences of that unchecked desire playing out.
Yeah, you couple that with things like increasing population, the need for greater sacrifices,
Yeah.
Working harder, gaining less, giving more, needing more patience.
It creates this complicated situation that is disturbing and frightening millions of human beings. The lecture paints a vivid picture.
It does. It talks about a perceived complete collapse of our social system, political issues, economic disabilities.
All leading to this continually increasing negative approach to circumstances and just widespread anxiety.
That's a really hard truth, isn't it? The sources aren't just saying, oh, don't worry. They're showing worry as like an active poison.
It solves nothing and makes us sick.
Exactly. It's a cycle that doesn't just block solutions, it literally degrades our well-being. It's a powerful indictment of very common human habit.
Which leads us to this really powerful, maybe uncomfortable idea from the sources. Man is the cause of his own trouble.
Oof, yeah.
Even if problems started with our ancestors or get passed to descendants, the only cure, they argue, is for man stopping causing them.
It puts the responsibility squarely back on us, the individuals, not blaming external forces.
It's a crucial pivot point in the whole argument.
It is. And this ties into insecurity. The sources flat out state insecurity is the great measure of our time. We're all searching for security, but maybe looking in the wrong places.
Like wealth, for instance. We tend to think, if I just have enough money, I'll be safe.
Right, the common assumption. But the facts, as presented, show many wealthy people are worrying worse than anyone else.
Why is that?
Because wealth, paradoxically, can actually destroy things. Families, homes, even health. It brings its own unique set of anxieties. So, money. Well, It's not the answer.
Okay, not money. What about intelligence? The mind itself, it's capable of amazing things, creating solutions?
Absolutely fascinating, the mind. Incredible technology systems. Yet the sources point out its failure, its inability to really cope with things like war with crime or with poverty.
It cannot correct the present existing circumstances when it comes to human behavior. Is that the idea?
Pretty much. Every intellectual solution seems to hit new roadblocks that are rooted in those, uncurbed desires we talked about.
In science, a product of the mind, offering cures, innovations.
Magnificent stuff, science. But it also gives us mechanisms which could destroy the entire human race.
Right.
Its great weakness, the sources highlight, is this failure of humanitarianism.
Yeah.
It's brilliant on knowledge and advancement, but it doesn't inherently care for the vulnerable or, guide our moral compass.
It's powerful, but sort of amoral in itself.
Exactly.
Education seems to face a similar paradox. Universities push the mind, fill it with knowledge.
Yeah, strain the mind, as they put it. Yet students still fall into narcotics, alcoholism, and other corruptions.
So it raises a big question, doesn't it, about education's power to solve our deepest problems if it doesn't also cultivate maybe wisdom, inner discipline.
That's the question it leaves hanging, yeah.
So if science and education fall short on ultimate security, what about religion? Historically, that's where many found profound answers.
Well, the sources give this really interesting historical perspective on religion's role. It's changed.
How so?
They point out that religion deals with invisible principles, right? Whereas materialism deals with things we can see.
Okay.
So in an increasingly material world, that puts the materialist at an advantage, maybe. Makes those invisible principles feel elusive, harder to grasp, which can feed worry.
So how did religion adapt to that?
Well, the insight here is that religion evolved. In ancient times, people maybe clung more to spiritual integrities because the material world was so unknown, so unpredictable.
Makes sense.
But as knowledge of the material world grew, religion started to adapt. It became, as the sources put it, theologized.
Theologized, meaning?
Meaning it started relying more on visible symbols. Think grand cathedrals, formalized rituals, ways to make those intangible spiritual principles feel more concrete, more real.
I see. But those visible symbols, ironically perhaps, led to issues.
Yeah, they led to theological complications, dogmatism, attempts to standardize men's beliefs, enforce uniformity.
Which eventually sparked resistance.
Exactly. What the sources call the religious rebellion, which we know as the Reformation. And that led to this huge fragmentation. Competing sects, all with their own interpretations.
And after that fragmentation
came the Age of Enlightenment, or humanism. A powerful reaction against that rigid dogmatic theology.
And this is where science really takes off.
Right, the rise of science. And with it, this definite basic antagonism between science and religion, a major split philosophically, intellectually, that we still feel today.
So bringing it to the individual living now in the 20th century and beyond, what's the takeaway?
The conclusion is pretty stark. You, the individual, might feel like you lack any solid psychological, religious, spiritual, or even scientific support.
Kind of adrift.
Yeah, adrift in a world of unreconcilable ideas. Common dissimilarity, they call it. Everyone doing their own thing, often at others' expense, without a clear, shared, guiding framework.
And beyond that, even if science gives us longer lives,
it doesn't give us any good reason for the life he has. It doesn't answer the deeper why. So many people can end up feeling miserable, even with material comfort.
This connects to a core problem identified in the material. Individuals lack moral support to try and improve himself.
Why is that, according to the sources?
Well, it seems to be a mix. Traditional attitudes aren't broadly accepted anymore. Education doesn't always focus on inner work, and societal structures can feel corrupt.
Creating this feeling that if you try to genuinely live by principles, you might end up, unemployed? Marginalized.
Exactly. A kind of helplessness within the system.
And this all culminates in this really powerful metaphor. It's almost prophetic sounding.
Which one?
The Tower of Babel that we ourselves have built is going to fall down.
Wow. Why?
Because society, the sources contend, has become dominated by self-interest. We prioritize what we want to do and will do regardless of consequences.
It's compared to alcoholism.
Yeah, as a symbol of that kind of consuming selfishness, with inevitable consequences that, we just don't like to face. It's a stark warning. Self-serving structures are inherently unstable. They eventually crumble.
Okay, so if the modern situation is this tangled, self-created mess, where do we even begin to find a path to self-development? How do we get out of it?
The sources are actually incredibly clear on this. The solution isn't external. It's not about changing the world out there first.
It's internal.
Yes,
Oh.
it lies in putting a discipline upon ourselves.
And while our troubles might feel common anxiety, uncertainty, we all face that.
The solutions, crucially, must be individuals. It's about internal transformation, person by person, not waiting for society to magically fix itself.
The lecture reinforces this really strongly. Man is never confronted with the problem he cannot solve.
Only problems he will not solve because the solutions are inconvenient.
That really hits home, doesn't it? It suggests the answers are always there, accessible.
If we're willing to make the necessary changes within ourselves, often difficult changes, let's be honest.
So, the first step, a crucial mindset shift, according to this, is to accept the complication as it is.
Right, stop dramatizing and emotionalizing it. We need to understand that, look, confusion is part of life. We're not going to change all these things instantly.
It's about accepting the starting point, however messy it feels.
And this next point offers a really unique perspective. We're encouraged to reframe problems, not as a disaster, but as a challenge.
Yeah.
They even say the inability to solve a common human problem is highly educational.
Educational. How so?
It proves that we are not infallible. And that, apparently, is one of the most important lessons we can possibly learn. A lesson in humility, in growth.
Okay. Another core idea to develop is this conviction that the universe is right.
Yeah, that things happen because of the immutable law of cause and effect.
Which isn't some cosmic tyrant punishing us.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's more like a universal principle reminding us that whatever that you want in life that is worthwhile, you have to deserve. It implies a deep order, a fundamental justice in how things work.
And if we understand that, we can cultivate gratitude.
Gratitude for the privilege of learning, the privilege of being here to face problems and solve them.
That's a challenging perspective, isn't it? To be grateful for problems.
It is. The sources go further, suggesting difficulties aren't punishments, but practical evidence of divine love, like guideposts, maybe, course corrections showing us where we've gone off track, gently nudging us back towards growth.
Towards alignment with that universal order.
Exactly. And this also involves making a distinction between two drives we all have.
Which are?
Aspiration versus ambition. Aspiration is defined as the desire to become more.
Internally.
Yes, inner growth. Whereas ambition is to accumulate more. External things, possessions.
And aspiration is presented as the superior path.
Definitely. Because it focuses on what's lasting, what's within.
The sources are really clear here. The more we serve the ego, our self-centered desires needing external validation, the worse off we are.
But the more we serve, the soul that lies within, that internal God within us, as they phrase it, the more we find genuine peace and happiness.
This feels like the central theme for finding real security, doesn't it? A security independent of external stuff.
Absolutely, that's the core message.
Okay, so moving towards self-discipline, that internal work. We're urged to become detached from the worrying set.
And self-sufficient to our own needs.
Which doesn't mean being selfish, they clarify.
No, it's presented as a necessary step so you can effectively help others. You know the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Right. And just like physical health needs good food, our mental health depends on what we take into the mind.
They call it mental nutrition. And they warn strongly against contaminated mental food.
Like negative thoughts, criticism, condemnation.
Yeah, described as hopelessly poisonous. It's like we're constantly feeding our minds, consciously or not.
And if we're not careful, we could be on a diet of mental junk food.
Pretty much. But the good news, they say, is we can live in the midst of it, but he does not have to become contaminated. We can choose what we take in.
So it's a powerful call to redirect our energy.
Instead of getting stuck in despair, actively focus attention on the understanding of life, the understanding of the way things must be and the way they should be. Shift from reaction to insight.
And cultivating this constructive thinking, it often involves, they suggest, religious insights.
Because religion at its core is described fundamentally as a relationship between the individual and the divine power behind and within himself.
A deeply personal connection, not necessarily tied to an organized institution.
Exactly. And this leads naturally to the concept of quietude, stillness.
Presented as a basic religious concept.
Right. And it's not about escaping problems. It's framed as an internal realization that there is something deeper than worry.
A source of internal strength, a calm center we can access.
That's the idea, accessing that calm center amidst life's storms.
Our minds, the sources say, need active re-education. We literally have to train them.
Train them to see the good in things, to observe progress, even tiny steps forward.
And to realize a misfortune is not a blight upon us, but a challenge upon our resources to accept the challenge of growth.
It's about reframing absolutely everything that happens to us as an opportunity.
And very practically, very simply, the only way to get over the mistake is to correct it.
Yeah, no amount of blaming or denying changes that. It comes back again and again to personal responsibility.
So how do we put these, quite profound principles into daily action? What are the practical steps?
Well, one key step is to just start observing. Observe the working of universal law in your everyday life.
Pay attention to cause and effect.
Exactly. The sources say you'll start seeing reasons for things which you now regard as merely miseries. The patterns become clearer.
And we should leverage our memory, that unique human ability.
Right. History, biography, autobiography, all of it enables us to estimate values, weigh all things, and cling to that which is good. Learn from experience, yours and others. Build on what's worked.
Before trying to help others, though, the advice is clear. Find an answer that will work for ourselves.
That's self-sufficiency again. You can't guide someone through a dark forest if you're lost yourself, right?
Makes sense. And engage continuously with your own situation.
Observe, reflect, think, feel, study. Really try to understand what's happening. Don't just react on autopilot.
And those responsibilities we can't avoid, the ones that feel like burdens.
The advice is to transmute them into opportunities. See them as chances for growth, for learning, for applying these very principles we're talking about.
We also need to develop an internal ruler, like a moral compass.
Yeah, a major rod, they call it. A standard we develop within ourselves to measure and understand the events of daily life, giving us perspective beyond just the immediate emotional reaction.
And in frustrating situations, when things get heated,
The advice is super practical. Take a deep breath, relax, and keep quiet. Don't argue, don't put salt into an open wound. Choose calm. Choose wisdom over that knee-jerk reaction.
what about when the mind is just really troubled, spinning in negativity?
Engage in constructive activities. The suggestions include arts and crafts, poetry, fine inspirational literature.
Anything that helps separate the person from negative thinking?
Exactly. It's kind of mental self-care, really. A way to consciously redirect your internal energy towards something positive.
Ultimately, true religion, according to these sources, isn't about dogma or rituals primarily. It's a way of conduct.
It means living these principles every single day, not just, showing up somewhere once a week or writing a check.
It's the power of the individual to see God or good in the occurrences of his daily existence.
Finding meaning and positive intention in everything, even the mundane or difficult.
And the goal is always to try to be peaceful and constructive and find the good in the thing as it is.
Yeah, always looking for the lessons, seeking the way of superior existence, which it's pointing to. It's an active search for that silver lining and the path forward.
Now, shifting a bit to how we engage with others, with society. Service is highlighted.
Service to others is called a tremendously remedying factor
Why remedying?
because it takes our minds off ourselves. And the sources repeatedly link self-obsession, being wrapped up in our own stuff, to deep trouble.
So a successful life is defined differently here.
Very differently. It's seen as one dedicated to service and not getting dedicated to accumulation. Service over stuff.
And in our relationships, beyond just providing physical necessities.
There's this tremendous unmet responsibility to offer moral or philosophical insight, to provide a spiritual foundation of integrities through our own conduct, especially, they mentioned, with children, modeling a principled life.
There's also a warning about relationships.
Yes, do not dominate somebody else. Don't try to live their lives for them. That incurs karma, they say, the inevitable consequences of interfering with another's path.
Instead, the aim should be simpler.
Much simpler. Strive to be kindly, well-intentioned humanitarian persons with as much mutual affection for each other as is possible. It's a pretty profound guide for just getting along.
And finally, when you're interacting with someone who's stuck in negativity,
Don't reinforce it. Don't jump in and agree with all their negative thinking. Instead, the advice is to encourage them, as far as we can, to find the truth behind their own actions.
empower them to see for themselves rather than just, commiserating in the misery.
Exactly. It's about fostering self-correction, not just shared negativity.
Okay, so after all of that, what does this deep dive really mean for you, the listener, right now? Where does it leave us?
Well, ultimately, I think it points towards Finding peace and happiness, not through changing external things, not through accumulating more stuff.
But through internal realization.
Yes, and through actively adjusting ourselves to fit into a larger universal plan. A plan that often feels kind of hidden in our day-to-day lives, but it's there.
And here's where it gets really, really profound, I think. The sources make it so clear material things just don't last. They're transient.
Whether we lose them now or later, they're not permanent.
So true security, real security, has to lie somewhere else.
It lies in living by enduring principles, consistently serving that soul within us, rather than constantly chasing external validation or gains.
This deep dive really hammers home that idea. The more we serve the ego, the worse off we'll be. But the more we serve the soul that lies within, the more we will come into the peace and happiness of realization.
It really is a powerful call to personal action, isn't it? Regardless of how complex or messy the world feels out there.
It absolutely is. Which leaves us with an important question for you to consider. Thinking about this concept of mental nutrition, what you choose to feed your mind, and the deep value of quietude, that inner stillness, what single internal shift could you commit to starting now to begin cultivating your own inner strength amidst all the world's complexities?
That's definitely something to mull over until our next deep dive.